Perhaps most appropriately today, the Oversight Committee mission statement reads, "We exist to secure two fundamental principles. First, that Americans have a right to know that the money Washington takes from them is well spent. And second, Americans deserve an efficient, effective government that works for them." Our duty on the Oversight and Government Reform Committee is to protect these rights. Our solemn responsibility is to hold government accountable to taxpayers, because taxpayers have a right to know what they get from their government. It's our job to work tirelessly in partnership with citizen watchdogs to deliver the facts to the American people and bring genuine reform to the Federal bureaucracy. This is the mission of the Government Oversight and Reform Committee. On September 11, 2012, 4 brave Americans serving their countries were murdered by terrorists in Benghazi, Libya. Tyrone Woods spent 2 decades as a Navy SEAL, serving multiple tours in Iraq, Afghanistan. Since 2010, he protected the American diplomatic personnel. Tyrone leaves behind a widow and 3 children. Glenn Doherty, also a former SEAL and an experienced paramedic, had served his country in both Iraq and Afghanistan. His family and colleagues grieve today for his death. Sean Smith, a communications specialist, joined the State Department after 6 years in the United States Air Force. Sean leaves behind a widow and 2 young children. Ambassador Chris Stevens, a man I had known personally during his tours, U.S. Ambassador to Libya, ventured into a volatile and dangerous situation as Libyans revolted against the long-time Gaddafi regime. He did so because he believed the people of Libya wanted and deserved the same things we have: freedom from tyranny. We join here today expressing from this side of the dais our deepest sympathy for the loss of lives of the families in Libya. Additionally, other Americans were injured in this terrorist attack, some suffering very serious injuries. I spoke to the father of one American who is presently recovering here in the United States in a military hospital. He hopefully will have a full recovery, but he has gone through supplemental surgeries that will require a long period of recuperation and reconstruction. Yesterday, the State Department began the process of coming clean about what occurred in Benghazi, or at least they issued a broad and definitive statement headed by a gentleman here today, Ambassador Kennedy. They made witnesses available and interviews. They made every effort, from we can tell, to ensure that the people we wanted to talk to were available to us. More importantly, yesterday they held a broad news conference over the phone in which they made it very clear that it had never been the State Department's position, I repeat, never been the State Department's position, that in fact this assault was part of the reaction to a video or the like. This is corroborated by numerous witnesses and whistleblowers. Contrary to early assertions by the administration, let's understand, there was no protest, and cameras reveal that, and the State Department, the FBI, and others have that video. Speaking of video, the one in California, made by an individual and out there for a period of time, also clearly had no direct effect on this attack. In fact, it was September 11th, the 11th anniversary of the greatest terrorist attack in U.S. history, in New York, Pennsylvania, and at the Pentagon. It was that anniversary that caused an organization aligned with al-Qaeda to attack and kill our personnel. I deeply, again, appreciate Secretary Clinton's efforts to cooperate with this investigation. She stepped in and instructed her people to cooperate, and they have. Additionally, I've had conversations directly with the Secretary, and I believe that our service together since 2001, the United States Congress plays no small part in her recognition of the role we serve on both sides of the dome. Today, however, this hearing has been called for the express purpose of examining security failures that led to the Benghazi tragedy. The safe haven within the compound, which some State Department officials seem to think could protect the Benghazi compound's inhabitants, did not work, and in retrospect could not be expected to work. The overall level of security at the compound did not meet the threat existent or standards under Inman or any other reasonable assessment for a facility of this sort. Today's hearing is the result of concerned citizens with direct knowledge of the events in Libya ultimately reaching this committee. As we look back on what occurred, our challenge is to identify things that clearly went wrong and what the benefit of hindsight will be for the men and women serving at dangerous locations around the world. Accounts from security officials who were on the ground and documents indicate that they repeatedly warned Washington officials about dangerous situation in Libya. Instead of, however, moving swiftly to respond to these concerns, Washington officials seemed preoccupied with the concept of normalization. We will ask our panel here today what normalization means. In accounts we have heard it included artificial timelines for removing American security personnel, replacing them with local Libyans. These occurred even as training delays and new threats also occurred. This rush toward a reduced presence of U.S. personnel continued even as a bomb blew a 12-foot opening in the wall of this very compound we speak about today. Requests for extensions of more security by the mission in Libya, however, appear to have often been rejected, or even, more deliberately, officials in Washington told diplomats in Libya not even to make them, or as we've had in sworn testimony, if you make them, they will not be supported. We know that the tragedy in Benghazi ended as it did. We now know that, in fact, it was caused by a terrorist attack that was reasonably predictable to eventually happen somewhere in the world, especially on September 11th. In closing, as Secretary Clinton has impaneled a blue ribbon board to fully investigate what occurred, and this work is important, it is much broader for us and for that panel to take up an additional challenge. There are hundreds and hundreds of facilities similar to this around the world. There are thousands of personnel serving this country who at any time in any country could be a target. Some of those are high risk and obvious, like Libya. Others may be lower risk. This committee is dedicated to ensure that security is taken differently than it was leading up to the events here. We owe it to our Federal employees who put themselves and their families in harm's way around the world. The history of these panels is, in fact, that they deliver full and complete results and they pull no punches. Admiral Mullen is no stranger to controversy and, in fact, getting to the bottom of it. So I do encourage all to look at the final result of the Blue Ribbon panel. But today it is 30 days since the September 11th attack, more or less. It is a long time to wait if you're sitting in Cairo, in Algeria, in Beirut, in Damascus, and you don't trust that the security measures you need have occurred. Today, we begin the process of saying they must be able to trust because you must be able to assure them that you're doing your work differently than just a short time ago. Today, we expect full cooperation from our panel, and we expect to get to the truth. But it will, in fact, be a much longer time before all the facts are known. We do not intend to flesh out all the facts. We intend today, on a bipartisan basis, to ensure that we begin the confidence building for our men and women serving this country around the world, that we will ensure that they be protected and, if anything, protected more than the perceived threat and never less. With that, I recognize the ranking member for his opening comments, and then by unanimous consent, one additional, the chairman of the subcommittee on national security and his counterpart will be recognized for opening statements. All other members will have 7 days in order to put their opening statements in the record. With that, I recognize Mr. Cummings.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And